talk now. Israel's Diaspora minister has branded London the most anti-Semitic place in the West and warned that open immigration has allowed extremism to grow. Amichai Chikli, I think that is, claimed a toxic mix of far-left wokeism and Islamic extremism meant our capital is no longer safe for Jews. The Israeli hardliner is a controversial figure who previously compared Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron to 1930s appeaser Neville Chamberlain for suggesting the UK formally recognised Palestinian statehood. He's also criticised Joe Biden, calling out the US president for caving into political pressure by criticising the Israeli military campaign in Gaza. We had on our show today, Crosstalk, we had the editor of the Jewish News, Paul Harris, on. Who, of course, is foursquare against anti-Semitism, but he did say that this guy is rather famous for chasing the headlines. He's outspoken to the point of attention-seeking. Having said that, there's something in... I'm not sure I'm buying that London is the most anti-Semitic city in the West. But of course, his general point that the environment in all of our cities, particularly every weekend with the pro-Palestinian marches, is not friendly towards Jews. And we do have a massive anti-Semitism problem rising and rising. So while I think he's gone over the top here, I think his sentiments should be taken seriously.
I think it's rich coming from him, because this is the same person that wasn't happy when Biden suggested that there should be an election in Israel because Netanyahu is a terrible look, because this is the person that has brought in right-wing, very unappealing characters into his government, which has effectively scuppered any hope for a two-state solution. So I think it's rich for him to comment on this. Of course, yes, anti-Semitism and the scenes that we've been seeing over the last few months have been horrific. I can't believe the kinds of things I've seen and heard on the streets of London's, of the country's capital. But it shouldn't be coming from someone like him. And I think to criticize people that the average member of the public who is seeing babies and children being pulled from rubble in Gaza and these horrific images of emaciated people and all of that, I'm sorry, that just screams of a certain level of inhumanity that I think is completely unnecessary in this whole conversation. You can see what's happening in London and say, yes, of course, anti-Semitism is disgusting, but at the end of the day, there are still people who are just seeing dying children on the screens, and I don't want to hear anything.
Really good point, because I was going to say, obviously, that he had a very valid point. I think, as Kevin was saying, anti-Semitism has grown massively. It's grown over the last few years, long before the Hamas attack. And London is a scary place for my Jewish friends to live, which is not something I ever thought I would see in my lifetime. And I was thinking in my head, am I going to get into a battle about, is France more anti-Semitic than the UK? But I think your point is absolutely right. We don't necessarily want to hear it from the Israeli minister. We are entitled to debate whether London has a big anti-Semitism problem, whether Britain does. But it doesn't help to have a kind of grenade thrown in by an Israeli minister.
By an ally who was supplying them weapons. I mean, how dare you?
I think, what do we think about his point about Lord Cameron? I mean, Lord Cameron does seem to be going out of his way to antagonise Israel.
Well, I guess he might use the Esther argument, which is it's no business of yours, as it were. It's a business for... But, we have skin in the game.
I'm not buying the fact that this guy doesn't have the right to say... I mean, an Israeli...
he has the right to say what he wants,
right
whether or not...
It's a double-edged sword, because at the end of the day, you're still talking about countries, the UK and the US in particular, that even though they're criticising the actions of Netanyahu's government, which is now a war cabinet, it's important to stress. It does have his opposition in there as well. They are also still supplying Israel with the funds and the military equipment that they need. So their actions are backing up their words, even if they're criticizing some of the actions of the Israeli government, which I think is perfectly valid.
So I think we should zoom out a bit on this and just imagine for a moment how these weekly marches look to the outside world. Yes. And the reality is that lots and lots and lots of people on those marches are not anti-Semitic at all. They just hate sight of... I mean, we all hate the horrible images that are coming out of suffering and starvation and horrific mutilation of babies. I mean, any one of us could march against that.
There are no functioning hospitals.
But zoom out, we do not look great on the world stage at the moment with these rabble-rousers, the fringe elements of these marches, week in, week out. I'm not really surprised that people are saying this kind of thing.